Today's episode is about how to time block your day for all those solopreneurs, side hustlers, and people starting out who are juggling a busy work schedule, personal lives, whose calendars have them feeling super overwhelmed. And it feels like all of those spinning plates are about to come crashing down. If that's you, then this episode is 100% for you.
The Realtor 180 podcast, where valuable conversations and industry experts collide. Let's dive in and transform your business today.
Today's episode will be discussing the secret of time blocking and the art of blocking your time into digestible hours. Whew, wow. With multiple businesses, family, kids, and everything in between, I absolutely need this episode. But before we dive into the episode, How to Time Block Your Day, how are you today, Mr. Shawn Kunkler?
Oh, so formal, Miss Cielo de la Paz.
Yes.
I am great.
Well, you're wearing a suit, so I feel like I have to call you Mr.
Fair enough. What's good in your world?
What's good? That's what all the cool kids say, by the way.
What's good?
What's good? What's good? Everything is good.
Yeah?
Yeah, got to go hiking yesterday. So
Oh,
that was
fantastic.
nice.
So you took a little time off for yourself. That's good.
Got a little bit of a tan. I don't know if you can notice, though. I always have a tan.
Year round. I don't. I get so pale in the winter.
Yeah. So, how have you been? What is good with you?
I have so many different projects going on. This episode is
Absolutely for you too.
It's so needed. And it's such a good reminder because with so many things going on and so many projects and so many tangents, if you will,
Yeah.
it's so very important to allocate time and make sure that everything's receiving what it needs to continue to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's more and more, I feel like, and the longer I've been doing this, it feels like there's more things happening, more things to do. Like now I'm doing this podcast, and this is just yet another project on top of other projects that I'm already doing.
As you solve a problem, you create another problem. So our lives are all about going to find better problems and bigger problems and new problems. And it's like, we're never going to get rid of the problem per se. We're just going to go and seek better ones. And this time blocking is such a good solution that does solve a lot of small problems across the board.
What's interesting about time blocking is that depending on who you are and what your business is, it might look different for you. So I know I've heard of this idea, time blocking, from other entrepreneurs, and it's different from how I do it. So I think this will be interesting, and I'd love to hear how you time block your day. And I bet it's a little bit different from mine because
I'm sure
we have very different activities.
Yeah. So let's kind of first, we just spoke very high level, but let's break that down a little bit. It's called and referred to as time blocking or time boxing.
Mm-hmm.
I know there was an article about Elon Musk who he calls it time boxing. Essentially what it is you're taking the activity, the task, you're in advance trying to figure out how much time is going to be needed for that. And then you're allocating that time to your schedule. That's a approach, but that's kind of a quick overview summary of what it is and how it applies.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a basic concept. Oh, but so hard to implement.
It's so hard. So let's back up to the beginning.
Yeah.
When did you realize you had a problem?
Oh my God, I know. It's like
when is there a time when you kind of hit that point of it's usually painful. It's overwhelm, fatigue, stressed out, a little bit mixed with a little bit of burnout.
Yeah.
But tell us about a time or the moment before you decided to time block.
That I needed this solution.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I can think of one time. It was a lot of my days were the same, but the way my day would go. So this was when I was working part-time. I was working part-time as a designer, UX designer for a company that did videography and photography and helped freelancers. So I was working for them. And so I would take the ferry in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I would vlog for 20 minutes and just kind of go off to the side. Luckily I had a good background. I had the Bay Bridge, like the wharf. And then after 20 minutes, I would go into work. And then I would work for a few hours until lunchtime. Okay, so I do UX design. Then I would go into work, and then lunchtime would come. So I would go downstairs, bring my iPad. There was a Starbucks downstairs, luckily, and I would answer emails on my business, And then during that time, I would try to do a little bit of designing, and talked. I think at that time I had an admin, and then kind of touch base there. After 45 minutes of that, I would scarf down lunch, 15 minutes, come back up, and then get back into doing design until 3 p.m. And then, my ferry wasn't going to come till like 5. So then I'd go back down to the Starbucks, and I was pretty tired actually by 3 p.m. But then I would make myself write copy and then, other various things. So you can see throughout that one day, I did so many different activities. And then sometimes in the evening, I would try, like if I think at one point I was working on my course, I would try to get in filming a part of the course. And by the end of that day, I was just so exhausted. There's just so many activities that were happening. And I remember each time I was doing one activity, I couldn't focus because I was thinking about the next activity. And I could never enjoy what I was doing. And I could never feel right. Like I felt guilty that I always felt like I was supposed to be doing something else. Do you know what I mean? Like it was just, like it was always like, I'm working on this one plate, but then I was worrying like that next plate. So it was a horrible mess because it was stressful. I was feeling tired and I never was in the moment, and I was worrying about the other thing, and there's so much, it was just a mess. So at that point, I was like, there needs to be a better way. It was just too hard to keep doing it that way. It wasn't sustainable. I was so tired at the end of the day.
You reminded me of Shark Tank. Every entrepreneur, there has to be a better way.
Yeah, there has to be a better way.
But it sounds like there was some time blocking that was naturally happening.
Yes. Like I said, everybody has different ways to time block. And in a sense, it felt like it was time blocking, but it was still too much for me. It might work for other people, that kind of time blocking. But for me, there was a lot of context switching from very different activities. Vlogging and being in front of the camera is such a different activity from sitting in front of the computer and being creative and doing design work. And that's so different from sitting down and writing copy. It's using different parts of your brain and just having to switch back and forth between even just like doing design work and entrepreneur work. They're like completely different brains.
They're totally different.
So that for me was really hard, and I knew I had to change it because it wasn't working for me. And I think that's the crux of it, is that you have to stop and think and just see for yourself, is it working for you, how you're doing things? If it's not, I think that's probably like the first part of the problem, is realizing, is this working for me? If it's not, then you have to think of it and do it in a different way.
The beginning point is, for me, does this work?
Yes.
Because we're all wired completely different. And if it works, but just not for you, then it's not for you. And it's cool. It's okay. Acknowledge it and then go find what works. You remind me of a documentary I saw, gosh, it's probably like 30 years ago. And it was about this artist who, she was obviously incredibly talented and super creative, but she would lock herself in a cabin, and like when she was in creative mode, and she wouldn't do anything that was essentially her left brain. So no math,
that's really good.
No balancing books, no, doing checks or making decisions that are like numbers and analytical, because she felt it pulled her out of that brain.
Oh, and can you imagine? Yeah.
And it sounds like for you, like you're doing an activity, then you're being pulled out, you're using a different part of your brain, and then going back and forth and back and forth. And eventually it sounds like it fatigued you out.
Yeah, it did. It did.
That's interesting. And I didn't realize it until you shared it, but I've segmented my week.
Yeah.
My 7-day a week schedule.
Your 7-day week.
My, what is it? The Beatles, 8-day a week.
Your 8-day week.
8 days a week. I segmented them up where I have days that are more creative, and then there's days and these are usually more monthly, when I'll sit down and actually talk to my bookkeeper, talk to my accountant, and go through the dollars and cents and make sure everything's balancing and looking right. And that's very linear. It's very left-brained.
Yeah.
It's numbers and data. It's very different than, hey, let's create a marketing plan, or let's review all the visuals that we're pushing out for the month.
Yeah. So did you do that out of, intuitively you knew to do that, or were you doing it a different way before?
I Forrest Gump my way into a lot of things. I just kind of like, oh, here I am. This is amazing.
If you haven't watched Forrest Gump, you must.
Yeah, you have to. You're probably going to hear that reference from me a few times.
I know. I love that reference because I feel the same way.
You know where that came from?
Where?
My buddy Jonas, when I was studying jujitsu, in jujitsu, there's moves. Like there's, you're trying to like basically get somebody to tap out and be like, you totally Forrest Gump me. Basically, like you kind of like stumble into the move and then take
and just went with it.
And it just, you kind of go with it and it works. And so that's actually so where I started using the term.
It's a good term.
I digress. For me, as a realtor, and when I was starting out, I had lists and lists and lists of things that I had to do, had to learn, had to study, had to understand, from like building websites to advertising to learning the different contracts and forms and addendums and all of these things. And I realized like, studying a contract requires a very different part of my brain than studying and looking at how does the website feel.
Yeah, see, they're completely different things, very different activities. Yeah.
One of the things that I started to do is I kind of grid out my work. Is it important? And it's going to get two titles.
We all know that at the heart of a realtor's business is the referral. My question to you is, are you proactively building out your trusted referral network? My goal is to connect our community with top performing agents across the country. To join our exclusive community, visit www.realtor180.com and click the Join Our Network tab to connect.
So it's either it's going to be important, or urgent, right? And like if a client calls me up and they want to write a contract, that's urgent. It has to be done right now.
Nice.
But picking the font on my website, that's important. It really doesn't take priority.
Is there anything that's not important?
Everything is important for the business. Like if it's going to make it to the to-do list, it's important, but it's not always urgent.
Yes.
And then with that, it can kind of take a back seat. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I did was I've divided out my week and figured out what activities to do on those days. And then within that, I figured out what items were at the top of the list. And then I've budgeted my time.
Got it. Okay. I like that. I love that you have this important rating, and that's something that I could definitely use. Wow. Thank you, Shawn. That's super useful. And being able to have things bubble up to the top of the list when they need to, so that you can get to it right away.
Yeah.
I think that's really great. And that can certainly help you time block your day so do you do it like everything urgent, like that's the first thing you attack?
Yeah. So for me, urgent are activities that will produce me income, because without revenue, I have no business.
Yes.
That is a great one. I can't sustain, I can't stay alive. So within my day, those activities, those take precedent, period, exclamation point.
Yeah.
Get those done first.
Right.
And in my business, I'm 100% commission. So it's a true business. And within that, if a client has cash, I can close the deal in 7 days, meaning I can get revenue to the business in 7 days.
7 days. Yeah. So that's really,
So if it gets a dollar sign, it's getting my attention.
Yeah.
And then once those are done, then I can move on to the next project.
I like that, because I know for entrepreneurs, we do have all these activities like picking fonts and so on. And being able to identify which things are important in terms of revenue for your business. And I think as business owners, that's kind of what we all really need to care about, because otherwise there is no business. So I like that those are the projects that get the priority versus just randomly kind of, today I'm going to do marketing and tomorrow I'm going to do filming. I think for me, I'm going to look at my list, and right now I'll think about, okay, what are the things that are really going to get me revenue within the next 7 days and so on. And things like picking font will probably fall to the bottom of that list.
I kind of view it as I'm a carpenter.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't show up to a job site with wood, a saw, and a hammer and just start cutting and swinging.
Okay.
The first thing I do is I look at the plan.
Okay, sorry, because I was like, don't you nothing about being a carpenter. I was like, wait, that sounds right.
It sounds right, but it's
right. Never
not
mind.
right. So, I mean, the first thing you do is you plan out your work.
Yes,
you have a blueprint, and then you follow the print to, like, it's the model, the mock-up of the result that you're going after.
Right. And
I feel as an entrepreneur, we just start running in directions, and we don't plan our work.
Yeah.
And then we don't work our plan, and then we don't get the results we want.
It's true.
Then we feel overwhelmed, and then we start to cycle over. And
I have to, in defense of the entrepreneur, that's kind of how until you really have to grow your business, that's kind of how you just start. That's how you get moving forward. And I think that's what's so great about entrepreneurs is you just kind of like full speed ahead and, kind of like haphazardly throw things together.
It's true. I did that too.
Isn't that how everyone starts? I know that's how I started. So maybe there are entrepreneurs out there who are way more organized, but that's definitely how I started. But at a point in time, you do need to be a little bit more systematic if you want to sustain and grow your business.
So within that, typically on Mondays, in the morning, after the cup of coffee, is I sit down and I try to map out my week. Obviously, fires are going to occur and problems are going to arise, and I won't be able to stick to plan. But at least I'll be able to measure where I'm going, and then the following week I can take inventory to see how close I got to where I needed to go.
Yeah.
And then pulling back, the one thing that I like doing at the beginning of the year, actually at the end of the year, is I write a business plan for the future year. And then within that, we all do. There's pages and pages of projects. One of the activities I love to do is I take all of those projects and I put them in groups.
Yeah.
Like with like, or similar with similar, as best as I can. And then within that, businesses have seasons. Real estate has seasons. There's kind of, there's more historically every year over year, regardless of what the economy is doing. There tends to be a buying season. There tends to be a selling season. And then within that, how do those, if I can take all of those big projects and put them into 4 groups, how do those 4 individual groups best match up with the quarters?
Yeah.
And then those become quarterly projects.
Gotcha.
And then daily, I like to not chunk up my day more than 4 pieces, because it starts to get, for me, it's a little bit more popcorny, that experience you had in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I have, my week is segmented into days. Like, we sit down and do this podcast on the same day, week after week. Consistency is king. And then within that, what are the monthly activities? Reviewing my books, connecting with my bookkeeper, things like that.
Yeah.
And then you have your quarterly, and then you have your annually. And I know it sounds super overwhelming at first, but it does take away a huge layer of stress.
Yeah, I think that works. It sounds like that's working for you really well, right?
For me,
I think I think that's great, because you have these smaller chunks of time, like daily and then weekly, and then have a plan for the month, a quarter, and for the year. I think that's a great way to go from the small to the larger plan. And I think, do you use any tool to track that?
Google calendars.
Google Calendar, okay.
And my assistant.
No, I see. That's super useful.
So, sorry if you don't have one yet. That's the first hire. It's amazing.
That's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I find having daily check-ins and just being very regimented in that. And it's constantly plan your work your plan, plan your work your plan, and just back and forth. And to just keep everything moving forward. And again, as we talked about at the very beginning, that recipe is not for everybody.
Yeah. Again, like your recipe is definitely different from my recipe. So it sounds like chunking your day, into 4 pieces works for you. Okay. Right. For me, that still is too much chunking. For the activities that I need to do, like I said, it depends on who you are and what your business is and what you're trying to do. You might have to chunk yours slightly differently. So for me, filming, I can't film for part of the day and then, do something else like work on the websites. For me, filming needs to sometimes be its own half day.
Yeah.
And that's the smallest chunk I will devote to filming is half the day. Because it takes time to set up. And sometimes I'll record 2 things in one day because it takes time to set up. Doing makeup. Oh my gosh. Okay, guys. For the ladies or for those that do makeup, y'all know how long that takes. So there's that. And having to kind of, just have to do all of that effort. That takes time. So for me, if I have to film, it will either take up all day or half the day.
And again, that's fair too. And I feel the bottom line is just figure out if time blocking is going to work for you, and then how will it work for you?
Right.
Because it shouldn't be another chore or pain in the butt. It shouldn't make things more complex. It should make things more organized and easier.
Right. And I think, what we can't help you with is what works for you because everybody's different. As you can see, Shawn has his done differently and mine is very different. So my filming, because I do filming, and then all of my client facing or, all of that also gets chunked into an afternoon. And I try not to actually do emails as much. I remember before I would just answer emails as they came. That was one that kind of crept in, and I didn't realize that was actually breaking up my day more than it had to. And that would force me to context switch every time I checked my email and answered an email. So now if you try to email me, to be honest with you, I reply every other day. Unless it's urgent.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, so I don't even check it. Like I will skim it. If there's something urgent, and it looks like it's, for a potential new client or, new partnership, new sponsor, I will answer those right away. But, if it's urgent. Yeah, so I guess... But like I said, I try not to respond to emails right away because it does, for me, it forces me to context switch. And I think that's what is one of the benefits from chunking your day or time blocking your day is that you're lessening that context switching because that takes up time and it allows you to be more present in what you are doing during that time. I mean, that's what happened for me anyway. When I was filming and I had the luxury of having half day to film, I was able to enjoy it more, and I wasn't thinking about what's the next thing because in 20 minutes I have to switch to doing something else.
One awesome secret I discovered about how to intercept the volleyball game of emails.
Ooh, yeah, I'd love to know.
I get up really early.
Okay.
Usually about 5 or 6. Respond then. Because no one else is up and they don't start responding until about 8 or 9 when they start getting to the office and start moving around.
Yeah.
So it allows me to just really hammer through a bunch of emails and get them off of my plate. And my clients know that unless it's urgent, unless we're in a deal, unless there's some massive decision that needs to be made, like I will respond within 12 hours, but it'll likely, if you email me at 7 at night, you're going to have to wait till the next day.
Yes.
And you're going to get an email back at about 6 in the morning.
Nice.
And,
love that.
And that's it. But I do find, and I'm sure you've all found this, is if you shoot the email off at noon and like in the middle of the afternoon, immediately they respond back. And then you have this weird pang of anxiety. You're like,
do I answer now?
Well, they're in front of their computer. I'll just respond now. And then you send it and then they volley it right back. And you're like, oh, damn it. And now you have like 2 or 3 going because you've now entered the volleyball game with 2 or 3 other people. And then it's like this thing starts compounding and getting out of control. But I found even with responding to emails and things like that, doing those at certain times, as well as fitting them in with you and with your biology, your physiology. In the morning, I like to have a cup of coffee and have my morning routine, which we talked about in another episode.
Yeah.
And then within that, I'm most creative typically from the morning until about noon.
To bring up, yes.
So I do more of the creative process at that part of my day.
Yeah.
And then I do the work, the activity of, usually in the latter part of the day. And I try not to do any heavy lifting mentally, any big business decisions or reviewing projects and things like that. If I did that at 4 or 5 at night, I usually I'm not analytical enough. I'm not able to dig through the individual pieces, and that's best saved just for the next morning.
Yeah.
So knowing that about yourself, I feel is so incredibly important as well.
I think that's a great point to bring up, because not everybody everyone's got different points where they have a lot of energy. I'm definitely a morning person. All of the writing, any of that kind of work, I like to do in the morning. So emails and writing copy, anyhow, things like that happens in the email. Whereas filming, I need to be a little bit more awake, and to me, it feels better to film in the later morning versus early on. Because I don't know, but like I said, so my point in saying this is, it's a little bit of trial and error to know what works for you. The important thing is that you try different ways and see which one works for you. Because I know I did try filming early in the morning and it just didn't work out for me. And so you just kind of switch back and forth. And that's how I personally figured out what schedule worked for me. So when I did that chunking, when I went to work and then did stuff at lunch and then went to work and then did stuff in the afternoon, I thought that chunking would work for me, and it didn't. And so I had to try to do it in a different way. I did want to mention one tool that has made a really big difference for me that I use fairly religiously. It's a paper journal. It's an actual book that you fill in, but it's called the bullet journal. And ever since I got that, I was able to be more productive. And it not only helps you chunk your time and your week, so it has a week overview, similar to how you break up your time. Yeah. But it also has a daily page, and in that daily page, it makes you decide the one important thing that you need to do for that day. And it says, with the question of it, and it's the same for every day, is, if I accomplish this one task for today, would I feel it was a productive day? So what is that one task? And
that's a great question.
That is my one chunking. And I don't move on to item 2 and 3 unless number 1 is done.
And I'll actually back up and say we're not sponsored.
No.
By them. There's no money has exchanged hands. No. This is just all on your own accord.
Are the tools,
and I actually don't use that tool, but it sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so the bullet journal, and then I think I had shared my process with you. So having worked in software and design, we have this thing called the Kanban board, right?
I love the Kanban
board is basically you have all of your tasks, and then you have things. It's similar to the bullet journal, but on a bigger scale. So tasks for today, tasks for tomorrow, for the week, and then from the month, and you're pulling things from your task and you're placing them into each of the different columns.
Yeah. When we sell a house, it's all project based. So we actually use it. We've morphed it. And I liked that you shared it's all a matter of testing things.
Yeah.
See what works, use what's useful, get rid of the rest. So with the Kanban is we created a Monday, Thursday.
Yeah.
So Monday, we go over everything that needs to be done until Thursday. On Thursday, we review, was it done? Who did it? Why wasn't it done? Who needs to do it? And then the same thing, we carry it to Monday. So it's similar. Like we took the pieces that were useful, we fit it into what we do, and we made it work. And I always feel as an entrepreneur or being a small business, we're super nimble, and that being nimble is such an amazing attribute. And it allows us to go and test these things.
Yeah.
Because the large, huge corporations, that's where they get stuck. They can't test. They have to make sure it works perfectly the first time.
And it's hard to change directions because you have to get everybody to do and yeah.
And that's the beauty of a solopreneur is you take inventory. If it's not working, you pivot, period. Yeah. And it's not about passing and failing. It's about trying and testing.
Yeah.
And experiencing, taking inventory, figure out what works, and then pivot from there. And I think with that, that's the perfect way to end this episode.
Yeah. So hopefully those two tools, or we have several methods that we shared with you. We really encourage you to try those out for yourselves and see which one sticks. And try it for a couple weeks. If not, try somebody else.
Yeah, as well as I'm curious to hear how you guys try it, apply it, and use it. And or if it just doesn't even work for you, go ahead and leave that in the comments below.
Sounds good. Well, it was great chatting with you today, Shawn.
You as well, Cielo. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Realtor 180, where industry experts elevate your business. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend. Until next time, keep thriving.